Hello everyone, this is Gwydion with RPG Frequencies. Thanks for stopping by. Today's video, I'm going to go through a walkthrough of how combat works in Grimscar RPG. It might be just a touch boring, I'll warn you in advance. I'm not going to roll dice because I want to actually show you various outcomes. So rather than rolling and rolling until I get the result, I'm going to just record the result and show you. So let's hop in, and I'm going to start with showing you a matrix that I prepared. I'll make this available in the comment section. I'll drop a link. This is a Google Sheet. So what I'm showing here is the flow of combat starting from left to right and what happens based on different dice rolls. I have a legend down here that will explain the acronyms that I use, and we'll just walk through and we'll do this step by step. So let's go to our combat sheet and the creature that I've chosen to fight in this instance. So the creature is a slithering mass. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark on this form fillable combat sheet some of the stats that I want to show and record to make sure that we keep track of. So my wounds, I get a total death line of minor wounds of 10. You start the game with. And then for major wounds that are down in the left-hand corner, 3. Okay, those are mine. So I'm going to show up here how many have I taken. I'm going to show 0, and I'll count up to 10. You can do what you want. I created, I took the character sheet or the combat sheet from the author, and I modified it a little bit for me. I want to be able to track any modifiers that occur during the game. So I'll use these to track the modifiers. So that is, oh, and major wounds. For now, I'm just going to put 0, and then you can put details on your major wounds. So let's go ahead and write in the information for the foe. So we're going to type in slithering mass here so we know what we're fighting. We will show that he starts with, again, 0 and his for minor wounds, but he gets up to 5 minor wounds and then up to 3 major wounds over here. He does have trigger abilities. So if he rolls a natural 2 or a natural 5 on his combat die, then one of these trigger abilities will immediately be triggered, and you'll resolve those. His reward, if you beat him, you will gain 1 reputation. So his combat die is 6 and reserve die is 8. So we'll go through that. But that's it for setting up the combat. And so let's just start. We are going to go back to our Google Sheet, and we're going to start with when you roll combat, there's no real initiative. You're both fighting each other simultaneously. So what you're going to do initially is roll both of your combat die. So my combat die on my character sheet is a d6, and his is a d6. So the first thing we'll do is we'll roll our combat dice. So I'm going to say that I outright roll a let's see, I'm going to say I roll a 6, and I'm going to say that he rolls a 5. So right now, if you go back to our character sheet, so we're in this top row here. So the character combat die roll is greater than or equal to the enemy combat die roll. So then you'll go to the right here and determine, does his enemy combat die roll, so does his die roll equal his trigger ability? And if it does, you immediately resolve it. If you don't, then you'd keep going down the attack matrix here. So in this case, so I am above him, which is great, but I rolled a 5, and he rolled a 5, which is his trigger ability, which is called Breaking Body. So that will give me a -1 to my next attack roll. So I'm going to put in here, and you can note this anywhere on, if you're playing analog or pen and paper, you can write this on your sheet, but I'm going to say -1 next roll, just so I know that. So we've resolved that. So great. So then what we do, then we're looking at the roll result. And again, I know it's my character combat die roll minus the enemy's combat die roll less than or equal to half of the enemy reserve die maximum. So I know that there's a lot of acronyms here, but all that means is if you go back to the character or the sheets here, his reserve die is a D8. So the maximum is an 8. So you'll look at the difference between the character score and the enemy combat score, which is a 1, and you compare it to half of the D8. So in this case, half of a D8 is 4. So given 1 is less than or equal to 4, he will use his enemy, he's going to use his reserve die, excuse me. So the reason they do it that way, I think, is, obviously if there's no chance at all for him to use his reserve die and be successful, there's no sense in using it. You can only use it once per combat, so that it is something that's important to track. So let's go ahead and we're gonna I'm gonna simulate a roll there. If the character combat die roll minus the enemy combat die roll was greater than half, then immediately you go over to the character choice. But let's start, and we're going to come back here, and we're going to simulate him rolling. So we're going to say he rolls a 2. So we're going to add 2 to the 5. So now he's at a 7 combat score. Okay, so he rolled his reserve die. Now, the way the form fillable character sheet works, but again, you can just mark this off. You can click on this to make sure that you denote that, hey, he can't use that again this entire combat. Okay, so that's gone, that's done, which is nice. At least that is, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So, all right, so this roll results section here is done. Now we go to character choice. So now what happens is the character can choose to use his the character reserve die if it's still available, if he hasn't used it. And he can also choose to use 1 psyche stat per combat round. So your psyche stats, I probably should have pulled up a character sheet, but it's easy enough to look over here. And it has all of your psyche stats: rage, hatred, butcher, patience, pity, and hope. Some of them start at 5, I think, going down to maybe 4 or 3. And if you choose to use one of these, and maybe I'll simulate that in a second, but let's keep looking at this. So again, you can use your reserve die once if you want, or you can use a psyche stat. If you use a psyche stat after the combat round, you need to resolve any additional consequences and stat changes. So there are consequences for using your psyche stats, and you might have to roll on a table to determine what the consequence is, or if you actually use a psyche stat and you defeat the creature in that same round, then you would just gain 2 wear, which is kind of an accumulation of damage. All right, so let's go back and we can decide. I'm going to say I use my, let's see, let's just say we use my reserve die. Okay, we'll use my reserve die, and we'll say we roll a 2. So my reserve die is a 4, so we're gonna say I roll a 2 again. So now I'm at 8. So I'm above him right now, which is great. So let's keep going down this matrix. So this ERD check, and we'll see how long I make this video, but this is the enemy reserve die. Like he would have a chance if he hasn't used it. And if there's still an opportunity to use it, he could use it here after I've made my choice. So, all right, damage calculation. So and again, all my legends are down here, all my acronyms, but if the final character combat roll is greater than equal to twice the final enemy combat roll, then you get a major rule. Or major wound, excuse me. It's a fancy way of saying if your final score up here is double his, then he gets a major wound. In my case, it's not double, right? So I'm only looking at a minor wound at this point. So, so in this case, if did I do this right? Oh yeah, sorry. We're over here. The character combat roll is not greater than or equal to 2 times the final enemy combat roll. So it's a minor wound. If it's a major wound, there is a table you roll on to determine what impact, even the next round. So this whole combat, what impact does that major wound have? All right. So that then you would basically denote that this guy has a minor wound. So we would mark that, say here, there's a minor wound. and his reserve die is done, my reserve die is done, you'd reset these and you would go to round two. So let's simulate a round two. And we will, I wish should have frozen those panes. I'm not a Google, I'm more of an Excel guy, but let's just keep going. So now we're gonna simulate what happens if the enemy wins. And I'll just cut to the chase. If you're ever in a tie situation, and you can always use your rolls like your psyche stat, or you can use your reserve die. But if at the end of the day, if you tie, then nobody takes damage, but you still have to track that you've used whatever you use that round, your combat die, your psyche stats, but it's a tie, nobody takes any damage. So now we're going to go down to this second row here. So we're going to say in the beginning of the roll, we're going to say that that my score is a, I don't know, 5, and his, or no, let's say mine's a 3, his is a 4. Okay, so right now he is ahead of me, right? So he's ahead of me. So we're down here, and we'll look in the next section here, or the next column. The enemy combat die roll is not equal to the trigger ability, so no need to resolve. And the second section is not relevant because we don't need to worry about looking at his reserve die, 1, because he already used it, and 2, because he's already ahead of me. So he would not use his die if he's ahead of me in the combat. But now I get to choose. So let's go back and say that I am going to use one of my stats. And I could have pulled up a character sheet, but just to make this a little quicker, I didn't. Let's say my hatred stat is a 5. So if you use your hatred stat, you will check that off. You can only use one stat per round, and you can only use each stat once per combat. So I'm going to check that off. And let's say that's a 5 on my character sheet. So I would immediately move this up to move this up 5. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make this a 1. I'm going to say that I initially got a 1, so my 5 makes this a 6, because I want to show what happens if he actually wins combat. And if I actually force that, I would. Then I would also, because I had -1 on my next attack roll, because he had a trigger ability, I can take this out. Then I can move this down to a 5. I should have probably done that in the very, but you have to make sure that you utilize that. So then we go. So again, you use your psyche stat. You'd look in the book and determine after the combat round what is the effect of you using that psyche stat. So we're going to keep going in the round. So if the enemy has not yet used its reserve die, and if my score minus his score is less than or equal to half of his reserve die, he'll use it. But we know he already used it, so he doesn't get the chance. So then we would go through the damage calculation. Okay. So what I'd like to do is, so in that case, you've already seen how that works. But let's just say, for sake of argument, that we are in a situation where my score is a 3 and his is a 4 after everything is all said and done. Okay. The reason I want to show that, so he's greater than me here, but it's not more than 2 times his roll is not more than 2 times my roll, right? So it wouldn't be a major wound, it'd be a minor wound. But it's subject to, I always get the ability, if I have any armor, to make an armor save. Okay, so the way the armor save works is you're going to roll your combat die. And if my combat die roll is greater than his combat die roll, so sorry, if my save roll is greater than his enemy combat die roll, then if I have a minor wound, I don't take it at all. So let's just come back up here. So his final combat die roll is a 4. So because my combat die is a d6, I would roll d6, and if I get a 5 or a 6, it would be above his combat score, and then I'd be able to basically wipe out a minor wound. If he gave me a major wound, it would come down to a minor wound. Okay, so that's how that would work. And then finally, if you roll a natural 1 when you're rolling your armor save roll, then a random piece of armor is broken and can no longer be used, there is an ability to fix your armor by certain things. So that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. Oh, sorry. I stumbled around just a little bit and probably could have shown that just a bit better, but hopefully that gives you a feel for how does combat work. It is for me a little crunchy, which I like. And again, if you did have a major wound, you could track them more here. And then finally, once you die, you could roll, or you could, sorry, add the reputation, which is what your reward would be. So that's it. Wanted to make this relatively quick. Hope that's helpful to you. Drop a comment. If you have questions on combat, let me know. The Kickstarter's still going on. So if this looks like it's up your alley, I would encourage you to check it out. Till next time.